Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schwab Coaching. My name is Cameron May. I'm a senior manager here at Schwab, and this is Getting Started with Thinkorswim. And you know, with the markets threatening to set yet another record high close on the S&P 500, I thought, I'll bet there are plenty of stock traders out there who are looking for stocks to trade, but they don't know quite how to find them. Well, today we're going to be talking about using the scan function on Thinkorswim to build watch lists of stocks that one might be interested in trading or investing in the future. And we're actually going to be talking through 5 types of watch lists that a trader might use and build and have saved there for quick and steady reference. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Before we get to that, though, let me first of all say hello to everybody who's already chatting in out there in YouTube. Let me see who's here. We have, hello there, Will and David, Brown Buffalo, Bush 8531, George Lawrence, Robert, Don, Ricebird, John. Great to see everybody. Really do appreciate your attendance and your contributions to these discussions. If you're here for the very first time, I want to welcome you as well. I had somebody already, I was chatting with them. Very new to the Thinkorswim platform. Well, they're in exactly the right place. So hello to you first-timers. And if you're watching on the YouTube archive after the fact, if you're watching the recording of this presentation, enjoy the show, but be aware that you're invited to join us in a live discussion. This is a Wednesday webcast series, and it kicks off promptly at 2 Eastern. If you'd like to be here, we'd love to have you in our live stream audience. And I also want to let everybody know in the live stream that my very good friend Kevin Horner is going to be hanging out in the chats. He's going to be answering any questions that I can't get to. As long as they're not too far off topic, Kevin's there to pick up my slack for me. So thanks for being there, Kevin. And Kevin and I would like to issue an invitation to everybody watching, whether in the live audience or you're watching on the recording. If you have an X account and you're not following your favorite presenters from Schwab, please do that. It's the best place to connect with those favorite presenters. You can find Kevin on X at Kevin Horner CS. You can find me there at Cameron May CS. Okay. So let's get into this. Of course, the first thing that we always do is pause to consider the risks associated with trading and investing. Those risks are real. They can be substantial and significant. So bear these disclosures in mind. The information here is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered an individualized recommendation or endorsement of any particular security, chart pattern, or investment strategy. Schwab does not recommend the use of technical analysis as a sole means of investment research. And investing involves risks, including the loss of principal. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to talk about. We're really just focusing on scanning for stocks using the tools on Thinkorswim. We're going to be acquainting ourselves with those features, but I thought as long as we're doing that, let's also maybe construct a few example watch lists that might be quite commonly used among users of Thinkorswim. So I'm going to be talking us through 5 different potential watch lists, obviously only as examples. They're not intended to be for everyone. Feel free to customize these if we're going to be using them for ourselves. But we're going to be talking through bullish and bearish watch lists, how those might be scanned for and constructed on Thinkorswim desktop. We're going to be talking about dividends, growth stocks, value stocks. How do we create watch lists for each of those? So let's go right to Thinkorswim desktop. And this was sort of the backdrop for what got me thinking about this today. The S&P, there it is, right up there. Yesterday's close was the highest close in history for the S&P 500. Closed at 61.29, and right now we're at 61, almost 33. So maybe working on another record, and that can make that means that stocks are essentially pretty popular right now. So for users of Thinkorswim desktop, how might they go find stocks, and how might they keep an eye on those stocks until they see the moment when they want to buy them? So today we're going to be focusing on scanning. Now, Stephen says, how do you get into Thinkorswim from your Charles Schwab account? Great question. So it's software. You just need to download it to your laptop or your computer or whatever. You can download it right from within your Schwab account. You just go to the Trade tab, and off to your right there, you'll see Thinkorswim. Click on that, and then there'll be a big blue button that says Learn More about downloading Thinkorswim. Will just walk you through that process. So that downloads the software, and then you just launch it from the icon that's created on your computer's desktop, and just use your Schwab credentials to get logged in and get rolling. All right. So that'll get you started. That'll get you right here in the same place where I find myself today. And within that software, we're looking at charts right now, but but I'm going to move over to the scan function and specifically the stock hacker. We're going to be looking for some stocks today. And when you first launch this, we have this open format template. It's an open template that allows us to start to describe to Thinkorswim what sorts of stocks that trader or investor might be interested in finding, and then Thinkorswim will go out and retrieve stocks that fit those criteria. So I wanted to talk through not only the functionality on Thinkorswim, but also with the purpose of creating 5 example watch lists so that might be commonly used among users of Thinkorswim. Now, not everybody uses each or even any of these watch lists, and again, this is just for demonstration purposes only to get acquainted with the general navigation of the software. But I did want to have kind of a purpose to accomplish today. All right, so we're on the stock hacker. Now notice as we go to set this thing up, by the way, if you just want to wipe it clean, if you're not looking at the clean template, you can come right up here to the little menu icon in the upper right, the Show Actions menu. As I click on that, very first item says Reset. This is to reset any things that we've entered into the scan already. All right. If you want those to remain there, don't click reset. But if we just want a nice clean slate, click reset. It'll allow you to confirm this is really what you want to do. This will reset this page to the system default, and any unsaved adjustments, and we will be saving some. Those would not be lost, but unsaved adjustments will be lost. So you sure you want to proceed? I just click yes. And here we are, blank slate. So let's start off and say that we have a hypothetical investor who's maybe intrigued by the bullishness of the S&P 500, and therefore maybe they want to look for bullish stocks. For some traders, they prefer to find those with apparent upside trend and momentum, and they maybe want to trade those kinds of securities. Well, how might they find those sorts of things? How about let's look for stocks that are just keep going, that have been going up and up and up, and maybe they're trading right up close to their highs. Well, first thing that a trader might do is hit the pause button for a moment and define well, behind just price, what do we want from the stocks that we're trading? Well, let's suppose maybe these sort of trend or momentum traders, these bullish traders, are looking for the potential for continued growth. And so maybe they're not looking necessarily at the great big companies. Now, that doesn't mean that great big companies can't continue to grow, but how about the first thing that we'll choose from here in our menu? Let's look at the market capitalization of companies. That's just the size of the company. We take the price per share, multiply it by the number of shares, and that tells us the size of the company, sort of generically speaking. In other words, if we had a stock that's trading at $100 per share and 1 million shares, that would be a $100 million company. And we call that market capitalization. And this is searched for and displayed in millions of dollars. $1 million to an individual sounds like a lot. To a publicly traded company, it's not a lot of money. So how about we set as our minimum, and I'm going to do this deliberately, how about we set it at 2,000 million, or in other words, 2 billion. And let's crank that up, and notice as we start to enter our criteria here, there are many thousands of potential matches, but as we enter those criteria, let's set our cap here at maybe 10,000 million. That's 10 billion. That's a $10 billion company. So specifically, we're looking for a $2 to $10 billion company. That would fit right in the range of what we call mid-cap. So in the world of market capitalization, we have small cap, which is under 2 billion. Mid cap is 2 to 10 billion. Large cap, greater than 10 billion. And as we move on to our next criteria, we're going to start to see the number of potential stocks get whittled down. All right, so we have 2 to 10 billion. Next up, let's say the trader not only is looking at the size of the company, but maybe even the price of the stock. A lot of stocks have raced up there. You know, maybe they're not $5, $10 stocks anymore, but they might start to stretch out of the reach of some traders and investors. It could get a little bit pricey, at least in the reality of some. So let's choose as our second menu item here. Let's go for MARK, which on Thinkorswim, MARK is sort of an abbreviation. This is the way that I think about it, the market price of a security. So I'm going to set as the minimum here. Let's say our trader is okay with spending a little bit. How about we go for $100 stocks as our minimum? But let's put a cap maximum of $200 stocks. Now, there are only 552 stocks that meet just that one criteria. So that's really going to take the list of potential candidates and narrow it pretty significantly. All right. Next up, how about we look for, now this is a filter that's going to be, I don't know, it might not apply to everybody. None of these apply to everyone and everyone's approach. But I'm going to choose EPS. And this is done deliberately. EPS, earnings per share. Is this company profitable? How much is it generating in earnings per share of stock? But it's also a stock-specific metric, so it weeds out maybe some other composite securities. Let's just go for publicly traded companies that are generating an earnings per share. Let's just say we're just looking for at least some profitability, $1. Okay, so that's serving a dual purpose, weeding out anything other than individual stocks, also weeding out anything that's not profitable. Oh, thank you, Eva, for calling this out. I always appreciate that. I'm going to hit the pause on our example scan here for just a moment, and I'm going to make a request of those that are watching, either live, actually it is for the live audience, never mind. But yeah, there's been a survey that's been posted to the chat for the live stream audience to give me some feedback. Obviously, very early in the session, you can't give me complete feedback just yet, but if you do me this favor, click on that survey link, have that survey ready to fill out when we're done, then give me some honest feedback. What I'll say is it's a very short survey, 2 multiple choice questions, a comments box and a suggestion box. And I also will say, if you take the time to fill out a survey, I'll take the time to read through those survey details. I get that data, I read through the comments, I read through the suggestions, and it all helps. So it's never a wasted effort. Okay, thank you, Eva, for calling attention to that. Thank you, everybody, for filling out that survey. But back to our example scan. All right, so we're looking for mid-cap stocks priced between $100 and $200 per share that are at least profitable. Well, let's add some additional requirements here. None of this adds up to a stock that's actually going higher in price necessarily. So let's make that a requirement of the scan. And to do that, I'm going to add another filter. Notice I've run out of filters. There's only 3 by default. Well, I'm going to add another filter, and I'm going to choose what's called a study filter. Now, if you're following along on your Paper Money at home, this is not an option in Paper Money. It's only available on the live platform. So if you're wondering where it is, that's where it is. I'm going to go to the study here, and it's going to give me all of these choices in a menu for scanning for chart behaviors. So it's not necessarily the price or the size or the performance of the company behind the stock. It's actually the performance of the stock shares themselves. So what I want to look for here is the, let's look for stocks that are trading up near their, let's say, 6-month highs. So I'm going to look for, that's a price performance metric. So in the menu, I'm going to choose price performance. In a side menu, I'm going to choose, let's say, highs and lows. Actually, should we go with just near highs and lows? Yeah, let's go with near highs and lows. Doesn't have to be at highs or lows. Let's just say near highs or lows. And specifically, we'd put in a percentage that gets us, a certain percentage within a certain percentage of a specific high. The default is going to be a current price is within 3% of a 252 period high. That's pretty much 252 trading periods or trading days is basically about a year. Let's cut that in half. Let's call it 126. So we're saying we're looking for stocks, these stocks, but among those, only the ones that are trading within 3% of their 6-month highs, 126 trading days, roughly 6 months. And we're going to do that on a daily time frame, so 126 days. All right. Now, that might be adequate. Let's run our scan. Let's click scan. And notice it says it's waiting for the results. Thinkorswim's running through all the potential results. And look at that. Out of the thousands and thousands of potential stock candidates out there, there are only 25 that meet these scan criteria. And let's take one. Let's look at BPOP. see what it looks like on a chart. Let's see if it might fit the criteria of being bullish, or at least having been bullish up to this point. So here's BPOP. There's Popular Incorporated. Ooh, interesting development recently here. Looks like, is it trading near 6-month highs? Yep. And it also just recently broke through maybe a 6-month resistance level. Interesting. Now, to some, that might mean if it's pushing through a recent price ceiling, really hadn't closed above that level at all in the last 6 months. Each of these days, it teased above that level and it closed below it again. So we're sitting right there. Maybe a trader thinks it's going to go higher from here. But in any case, those are our results for our scan. And from here, trader has a couple of choices for how they might want to monitor these things. First thing they might want to do is build a watch list of these companies. So let me do this. I'm going to come over to our watch lists here. Right now I have loaded the S&P 500 components. Those are one of the public watch lists. But let's create a new watch list. And if you've never created a watch list on Thinkorswim before, you'll notice what I just did. I went to the top of the watch list heading that I have right now, click on that, and I'm going to go to create a watch list from the pop-up menu. Now, Gina says, do you want to consider volume? That could be another filter, Gina. Absolutely, yeah. The trader could select that from the stock menu right here. Now, it's also, because we're dealing with the mid-cap companies tend to have pretty strong volume anyway because they're $2 billion companies. Not universally the case, though. So volume, sure, might consider that as well. But let's create a new watch list, and we can give this a title. This is just going to be our example bullish watch list. And then to build that watch list, all we have to do is start typing in the symbols down here. So let me move this over to the side where we can see the symbols. And we can just start typing AEIS and hit enter, and that's now on our watch list. Go down below AEIS, type in BECN, hit enter, and now that's on our watch list. Type in BOP, and you can see how quickly it would take maybe a minute or two to flesh out this entire watch list. I'll just stop right there with BPOP, that's okay. But once we're done naming it and loading it up with symbols, we just click save. And now the next time I want to load that, let's say we were looking at the public watch list, we were looking at the S&P 500. If I wanted to load up that watch list in my left column here, I just go to that column heading, go to my personal watch lists, and there it is, bullish. There are 3 companies. We could type in the other 25. Now that's one way. Sam says, Sam, thank you. Sam just asked this. I'd like to see how to create a watch list from a scan. I want a scan to convert to a daily watch list that will show me which stocks are uptrending. So one of the conveniences of having a watch list is it just has this static list of stocks, and then maybe we can track those on charts or whatever. And when we recognize a buy signal, however we might define that, we can go buy that stock. A difficulty is if we run the same scan next week, it's probably going to come up with a slightly different list of stocks, maybe a very different list of stocks. Maybe these stocks, while they're still on our watch list, are no longer actually qualified according to our scan criteria. So how can we update the watch lists on a regular basis? Can we, yeah, Don says, could we save the scans? Yes, we can, Don. Watch this. I'm going to go up here. Notice the little fire icon right there. There's a menu just to the right of that. So it's a second menu. I'm going to click on that menu. Come on, go away, little show actions menu. I know you're there. There we go. Anyway, but we're going to save that scan query. That just means we're saving this scan as it's currently constructed. And let's give it a name. I'm going to give it a slightly different name. I'm going to call this my bullish scan. So instead of just being a watch list, it is a scan. And as I click save, if I now go over here to my personal watch list, notice what's right there. Our bullish scan, I didn't have to type in anything. Here are the stocks that currently qualify. But next week, this could be a very different looking list. Yeah. So for the rest of this demonstration, rather than building watch lists, I'm going to be running scans and then saving the scans. And that creates the watch list. Okay? Yeah. Nice little time saver, I think. All right. Now, obviously, there are times when traders would prefer to have a static list of stocks or whatever else they're monitoring. So there we have a bullish scan. Well, let's tweak this a little bit and maybe make it bearish. So let's hide our left column for just a moment so we can see this whole thing. Let me scroll this down. Let's say that we have a trader who is maybe they're a contrarian. They're looking for stocks rather that are showing technical strength on a chart. Maybe they're showing technical weakness on a chart. Well, it's possible they might still be looking for mid-cap stocks trading in the same price range. Yeah, let's leave in our filter for earnings per share. Although, if they're looking for bearish, maybe instead of having a minimum earnings per share, possibly they put in a maximum. Whatever. Just having that as a qualifier there is a nice little filter, though, just to make sure that we're dealing with individual stocks. But then finally, to customize our study filter down here, do we want stocks that are near highs? Well, if we're a true contrarian, maybe, but maybe a trend trading contrarian, maybe we're looking for that to be, let me, I don't need to rechange, I don't need to submit that. I can just customize it here. Let's say the current price is within 3% of the 126 day or 6-month low. See what we get there. Let me run a quick scan. And it looks like here we have 14 stocks. Doesn't surprise me. There were more that were bullish than bearish. Well, yeah, that's what's going to happen when you have S&P hitting all-time highs. So let's take one of these stocks. Here's one, Vail Resorts. I'm here in Utah. Vail Resorts is actually a prominent name. They manage the Park City resorts as well as Vail's offerings over there in Colorado. Kevin's over in Colorado. Yeah, Kevin, let's do this Utah-Idaho mountain range thing. Okay, so how about we look at what's going on with Vail? It should be, according to the search that we just ran, oops, what did I choose? Let's choose the right thing here. There we go. Is it trading within 3% of its 6-month low? Yeah, and in this case, wow, look at this. Instead of breaking through a recent price ceiling, that looks like it's broken through a recent price floor. Interesting. Okay, so there we've created an entirely different scan just with a couple of minor changes to the criteria. Now, obviously, everybody watching this should feel like, yes, it's okay to go in and change the scan to, if you're running a scan for your own purposes, build it like you want it. But I just want to acquaint us with these tools. So Don says, can you review the D button? So the D just stands for day, Don, so that's the time frame. So if I wanted to look at, like, let's say, if I were to click on this, I could look at the last 126 1-hour increments or the last 126 weeks. That's what that D is. Okay. All right, but let's save this scan query. Now, notice how quickly the trader can build up different watch lists. Let's pop up here and let me click on the correct menu. It's the second one, not the first one. This is where the reset is housed. This one is our save scan query. And we're going to call this our bearish scan. Let's save that. And now if I go over here to my watch lists, I have bullish and I have bearish. And they automatically populate with current symbols. So that's 2 out of 5. I want to make sure that we construct 5 example watch lists that traders or investors might be interested in. So our next one is we're going to tilt less toward trading, maybe a little bit more toward investing. Trading might be more oriented toward the short term, investing may be more oriented toward the long term. So let's say we are, instead of a trader, we're maybe a would-be dividend investor. How might they run a scan here? Well, again, they can enter maybe they're looking for size of company. Let's suppose our dividend investor, it prefers to steer clear of maybe the small cap, the mid cap stocks. Why might a dividend investor prefer to steer clear of those? Well, for some, they prefer the large cap companies with the potentially deeper pockets, maybe the more established profit streams that aren't going to be under threat while they're just waiting for their next dividend payment to come in. So let's say that our investor instead is looking for that $10 billion company as a minimum, and I'm not going to set a maximum here. Just because there's the ability to set a minimum or a maximum doesn't mean that we have to for each one. Sam says, can you create a scan of breakout stocks, those that across the moving average indicator? That is, yeah, Sam, there are all sorts of study filters like that can be created. Obviously, I can't explore every potential scenario in this webcast, but I can say, yes, you can do that. All right, so larger cap company stocks might be the thing that our investor is looking for here. Maybe they're okay with looking at somewhat lower price stocks, but if we get really low, maybe those stocks are more volatile, give the investor heartburn while they're waiting for their dividends. So how about we set a minimum market price for our stock at $50, and maybe they're okay with even higher price stocks. I'm not going to set a minimum here. Let's just erase that. Next up, I just mentioned that dividend investors, some, not all, they prefer as smooth a ride between dividend payments as possible. Well, some stocks are not smooth. Inherently, they are more volatile. They just move more on average than others. And there's actually a metric for that. What's the metric? What's one metric for the volatility of a stock? Beta. Let me choose beta here. Beta actually compares the stock's historical movement in price to how the S&P moves. And if a stock tends to move right with the S&P, we'd say that it has a one-to-one relationship with the S&P. Or in other words, we would give it a beta score of 1. If it's a stock that moves with the S&P, but maybe it's less volatile, it would have a score that's still positive, but less than 1. So like a beta score of 0.8 would imply that a stock is moving in the same direction as the S&P generally, but only about 80% as rapidly. 80% up, 80% down as quickly as the S&P. So let's suppose that our investor here, who's looking for dividends, maybe they do prefer lower volatility stocks, maybe half the volatility of the S&P 500, or maybe just matching the S&P in volatility. So let's say a beta score of half, a 0.5 to 1. Alexa says implied volatility also related relative to the S&P. I think that's a little bit off track from where I want to head with this discussion. That's kind of venturing into generally, now actually volatility levels can have implications for stock traders. But I can say the VIX, yes, has a strong correlation to the performance of the S&P 500. But yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Anyway, so here we have larger capitalization companies priced at least $50 per share, maybe average to average or less than average to average volatility. Well, obviously our trader here might be interested in, are we actually getting a dividend on these would-be dividend stocks? Well, let's add another filter here. Let's add a stock filter, another stock filter, because we ran out of the first three. And how about we choose from our menu here, yield, dividend yield. How much is this thing paying on an annual basis? And right now, the average dividend paying company is actually a little bit less than 2%. So let's say that we want at least 3% from our stocks. And, you know, let's do one more. Let's do one more criteria. We're not talking necessarily about chart performance at the moment. So I'm going to take that filter off by clicking the X. And let's add a new filter that's more fundamentally oriented. One thing that might be a threat to dividends is debt. If a company has loads and loads of debt and they're pushed into a corner by their financial situation where they have to choose between paying their creditors or paying their shareholders their unguaranteed dividend, which one are they likely to lean toward? Yeah, they're probably going to pay their creditors. So how about we load up a debt requirement here? How about we look at, let's say, long-term debt. Long-term debt to capital. Generally, the more leverage a company has in the form of long-term debt versus the assets of the company, that could at least conceptually introduce higher risk for continued ability to pay dividends. So let's do this. I'm actually experiment with, let's just leave this current. And let's maybe put in, this is interesting. I haven't run into this before. What am I missing here? It's giving me no matches. I wonder, let me see if there's anything here that I'm missing. I don't think so. Let's go year over year. No. I'd have to experiment with that one afterward. It was filtering just fine. Might be a combination of one of the other criteria that I've entered here. Every once in a while, guys, if you get too demanding with a criteria, we can wind up essentially whittling it down to zero. If we're looking for the perfect company out there, perfect companies don't exist. But this one I'll just have to explore later. I won't worry about that. But let's run our scan here. How many companies do we have? About 69 that meet our other criteria. Market capitalization of at least 10 billion, priced at least $50, volatility less than average, and a yield above average. So let's throw these into a watch list. I'm going to pop up here, click on Save Scan Query. Let's call this our dividend scan. Now, don't feel like you have to give these things the same or even a similar name to what I've entered here. I'm kind of using very genericized, very basic names. But generally, the more scans and the more watch lists we have, probably the more specific we want to be with the labeling of those. Okay, so let's run save. Or let's click save. And now we have over here our dividend scan. And that will automatically populate with those companies. All right. So we have just a couple more that I wanted to talk through. Sticking with more of the investing outlook for things, let's talk about maybe scanning for growth stocks or value stocks. Okay, so here's another thing that we can do within this scan feature. If the top is starting to get crowded, we can actually click and drag on this little margin to give ourselves a little bit more space. It will expand that upper area so that we're seeing no overlap. There we go. And let's talk through a growth investor. This is somebody who's not just looking at price going up, but also looking at maybe the company health, sort of, they're looking for a confirmation of, in their view, a company that is fundamentally healthy behind whatever the stock is doing. George says another great feature is that you can intersect scans. Absolutely. Yeah, George. Right up here, a couple of things I should point out. We can choose a menu for directly where do we want to run this scan. We can choose to run the scan in all stocks. We can run the scan maybe, let's say, just through the S&P 500 companies. How many S&P 500 companies might there be that are $10 billion companies, priced at least $50 per share, beta below 1, and yielding at least 3%? So we can target our scans, or we can intersect. Yep. Like we could say, well, let's look for companies that meet both my, let's say, bullish scan and my dividend yield scan. Now we can intersect right here with our personal bullish scan. All right. So let's see. Let's build our growth scan. What are growth investors maybe looking for? Well, they could be looking at stocks that are maybe on the smaller end of things, possibly with more upside potential. Again, I got to emphasize here, it's not that huge companies can't get more huge, more massive, but maybe our would-be investor thinks that a smaller company, if it can exploit its competitive marketplace, maybe it can grow. So let's say maybe our market capitalization, we're going to go down into the small cap range of things, and let's cap it off at the top of the mid cap range. So how about $1 billion to $10 billion companies? And maybe they're looking for stocks that, as they're growing, they could be higher in price, but let's just set a minimum lower price at 100. Now, feel free to customize these as you see fit. A third criteria, beta. Growth investors are probably not looking for low volatility. More likely looking for higher volatility. So looking for betas between, let's say, 1 and 3. That would literally be companies that are moving at least as fast as the S&P 500, maybe 3 times as fast. Beyond that, it depends on a trader's appetite for volatility. They could crank that up further if they want to. But we'll just cap it at 3 for this example. Now, finally, let's put in some fundamental ratio metrics here. How about we come to our stock menu that we've already created, and instead of emphasizing dividends, which are not as commonly paid by growth companies, what if instead we're just putting that emphasis on earnings again? Earnings per share, maybe instead of just getting $1 per share, let's maybe say $5 per share. And let's add one more metric, because up here under the add filters, you notice we chose, we can select a study filter if we want to look at chart filtering, or we can do fundamentals to look at the company behind the chart. So how about for a fundamental filter, what if we again emphasize growth may be driven by profits? Let's go to the net profit margin. How much for every dollar in revenue generated is actually delivering to the company's bottom line for the just currently? How about we set as a minimum at least 10% profit margin? There we go. Now this is again not an exhaustive list of potential growth metrics, but if we run a scan here, how many companies meet these 5? Well, there are 5 small to mid-cap companies priced at least $100 per share, with a volatility that's average to above average, earnings of at least $5, net profit margin of at least 10%. All right, there we go. There they are. Let's add those as a watch list by saving that scan query. So let's save this, and we'll call this our growth scan. Not growth. Boy, that's terrible. That I hit a bad key, and phonetically it was going to still spell growth, but just terribly. Anyway, but let's click save, and we're left with one final example scan. Let's say that we have a value investor looking for maybe companies that have taken a little bit of a beating, maybe, but they're still generating profits. So how might that change the perspective here? Well, how about let's say our investor is looking for great big companies still. Big established companies that have maybe seen their price fall relative to their profitability. So let's set our market capitalization here to 10 billion. And let's say we don't want to necessarily look for stock prices that are you know what? Let's set our maximum at 200. We don't want stock prices that are up in the stratosphere too high. Let's set our maximum at $200. How about for our third requirement, let's go for a PE ratio. If you're not familiar with PE, it takes the current price of a share of stock and compares it to the earnings for the last 12 months per share. So let's say a company had $100. That's kind of an exaggeration for most companies. Let's say it had $10 in earnings per share last year, and it's a $100 stock. Well, its stock is trading at a multiple of 10 to 1. In other words, that would be a PE ratio of 10. And for some, that can be it's a fairly shallow metric for value, but it can at least be an indication of potential value. All right. And let's say that our trader is looking for maybe no more than a multiple of 20. In other words, for each $20 they're paying on the stock price, they want to see at least $1 in profits over the last 12 months. But for some traders, they even set a minimum here, which is kind of counterintuitive. Now, why would a trader set a minimum PE ratio? Well, if a stock is generating lots of profits, or has over the last 12 months, and yet the price is still very low compared to those profits, to some that might be a little bit of a red flag. It might mean that current investors think that last year was a fluke, and maybe they think that earnings are going to drop in the future. It's not a guarantee, nothing is. but let's just set our minimum here for at 7. So PE between 7 and 20. And then let's do this. Let's get rid of this stock metric and add another fundamental filter. So let's keep our focus on potential measurements of price to something else as a measure of value. So we already have price to earnings. What about price to book here and price to cash flow here? Low price compared to the book value of a company, low price compared to the cash flow the company is generating. And let's say that our book value, maybe we're looking for price to book of less than 1. In other words, if the company were to essentially liquidate, how much could be distributed to the shareholders after paying off their liabilities, maybe get conceptually a full refund of investment. And in our cash flow, what's the price compared to the cash flow? How about we want to see no more than a multiple of 3? I don't know. Let's see if we can get some companies here. Let's click scan. Yeah, it looks like 43 companies that are $10 billion companies with a market price not above $200, PE ratio between 7 and 20, price to book below 1, price to cash flow below 3. Let's add that as our final filter. This is going to be our value scan. So hopefully, as we've gone through the repetition of using these tools, all of you are feeling a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more confident in the navigation of the Thinkorswim scan functions. And also, I hope you feel like you could go in here and build these scans on your own. All right, everybody, for each one of these, they're just meant as an example, but we've accomplished what we set out to do today. I wanted to introduce us to the scan tool. I wanted to run a series of scans and actually build 5 example scans. And thanks for thinking ahead of me, because some of you are like, well, how do we build a watch list automatically without having to go and type in all the symbols? Save the scan query is the quick way around that. The Nodake, thank you. Appreciate that feedback. I'm going to let you go enjoy the rest of our educational offerings. But before you go, just remember, they have other resources that are available to you. I do have a couple of suggestions for you, a couple of requests. First thing is a suggestion. Make sure that you've subscribed to our Trader Talks channel if you haven't done that already. Again, if you've already subscribed, don't click on the subscribe button. It would actually unsubscribe you. But yeah, if you haven't subscribed, go down, click on the subscribe button. But the Trader Talks YouTube channel is where we host all of our playlists for our previous webcasts. Also, you can join the live streams right here. So make sure that you're subscribed. It only takes a second, doesn't cost anything. Another thing is, make sure if you have an account with X that you're following Kevin and me and your other favorite presenters there. So you can follow Kevin there at Kevin Horner CS. You can follow me on X at Cameron May CS. But that's the best place to connect with us in between the live streams. And I said I had a request for you. My request is, fill out that survey. If you're here in the live stream, click on that survey link now. You can give me some honest feedback now that we wrap things up. I'll read through those survey comments. I read through the data. It definitely helps. All right, everybody. Thanks for giving me your time today. I will see you again same time next week. I also have other webcasts all throughout the week. Every day that we're open, I have something on the calendar. So look for me in the other webcasts. I'll look for you there. I'll also look for you on X, but whenever I see you again, until that moment arrives, I want to wish you the very best of luck. Happy trading. Bye-bye.